All right, good morning. How's everyone doing on, from what I understand, day 2.5 of the conference? Is that correct? With like another 24 hours remaining? All right, so we're right at the 50-yard line, and it's fourth down, and we're going to decide what the next play is. So we've got an unbelievable panel assembled for you today. My name's Chris Camacho. I'm the president and CEO of a Greater Phoenix Economic Council, and I'm a little bit rugged because I just returned from San Francisco, this other place, vastly different than Greater Phoenix, and I won't be able to control myself, at least giving you some thoughts and opinions of what I observed the last 3 days in California. But we can't disregard the fact that San Francisco and the Bay Area is still the most innovative center in the United States and arguably in the world. And I'll talk about some differences between California and Arizona, and then we're going to move all the way down the paradigm of state, regional, county level, and then local level kind of observations of this paradigm shift. So I'm really excited and humbled today to have 4 of my friends here to talk to you about economic development. And I've had the pleasure of working with the 4 of these folks for the last decade or more. Julie the longest. Julie and I got to work together 2004. Yeah, so 2004 to 2008 down in Yuma. And then with Chris at the city of Phoenix, and before that she was at the city of Chandler. So Chris and I have had a lot of opportunity to win projects and compete for projects. And then Micah, who now runs Chandler, who's been a great friend for a lot of years, also spent time at the state, and has been a great champion for economic development and a great leader in tax policy and a lot of other aspects. And then Ponch, I think the notes said for you guys to self-introduce, but I just can't help myself. So Ponch, who most of you may have heard of Ponch, but he is one of the most bright, insightful individuals on this cornerstone of universities getting engaged in economic development, and specifically the innovation and applied research aspects of driving our market forward. And so Ponch will give a fair amount of perspective from not only Arizona State University, but kind of globally how universities are changing the landscape of economic development. So with that said, any questions before I begin? Because there is about a 10-minute quick overview of, if you look at the title of our talk today, it talks about the new paradigm in economic development for the 21st century, which is a very broad topic. But I will tell you, in my 15 years doing this work, I've seen radical change. And the radical change stems from a number of different global forces coming together to reshape how we think about building economies. So when I started in this profession, and again, you have to apologize, I'm an economist and tax background by training, so I'm going to try to make this as lively as possible for all of us, for all of our sake. But in reality, what's changed is that the old mantra of economic development used to be the new headline. And it used to be the headline where, for example, Mayor Lord in Goodyear, we would stand on stage and cut the ribbon and say, this is economic development. Now, we still do some of that, recruiting companies. But there is so much more. I would argue that's about 5% of economic development today. What happens it's almost like an iceberg. The majority of the work's happening underwater that most people don't even see. And what contributes to that is modern infrastructure. And so what's interesting is as we look at kind of tribal politics today, and again, I won't get political because I'm not a political guy, but I will tell you what's happening now is a new phenomenon, a new paradigm in politics where you have the left and the fringe pushing really hard on their ideals, and you have the hard right pushing on their ideals, and there's a lot of people stuck in the middle, kind of not sure where to tune to which cable news channel at the time. And as I was on the plane yesterday, I was flipping through. I was on the Southwest flight, and I was sitting in the middle because I didn't check in on time. And I'm looking at Fox News, I'm looking at CNN, and it was like, with all the Trump stuff that came out yesterday, there could not have been an unequivocally different position than what happened yesterday if you look at those 2 cable outlets. So economic development can't be guarded against that either. And so you have, again, the polarization of economic development relative to politics is something that many of us deal with. And I will tell you, all of us on stage, our main job is to keep our head down and execute and do our best to stay out of that political domain. So let me talk just a little bit about the transformation, and then I'll ask the panelists to reintroduce themselves this morning. So this paradigm shift is largely centered on the fact that the primary paradigm historically was based upon cost and supply chain. So companies would analyze where they're going to go, where they're going to place either a headquarters, a manufacturing facility, distribution, based upon the customer base, the supply chain of wherever they get their goods and other products that fit in their value chain. And generally there was a premise of the cost of doing business that was in the indices and the site selection due diligence process. And I would say arguably because we're a young state where many of these markets are young markets, we competed extraordinarily well because we're next door to the 5th largest economy in the world. And as these companies need to optimize and find a better location in Yuma or in Greater Phoenix or Tucson or Sierra Vista, wherever, we're the next door neighbor where it makes sense that we could compete on cost. What I would argue in the new paradigm, however, as you see global forces, you see Mexico's resurgence in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, certainly as you see other markets like, is anybody from Vegas or Nevada here today? Okay, so I can beat up on Nevada since nobody's here. Okay, so 10, 15 years ago, Nevada was like, this desert place that we never even saw on the radar. I would even argue 10 years ago, Utah was the same way. Today, for technology companies, for scalable back office enterprises, Salt Lake City is on the list. And the difference I'm seeing is that those markets that are doubling down on the P through 20 system are the markets nationally that are rising up to compete at levels that we haven't seen before. So I'm going to get into some conversation about kind of rural markets and rural competition, not only for the recruitment of jobs, but we'll also talk about the new paradigm, which is about growing jobs, about connecting your own industry base to each other. And Julie has a lot of examples of what I've observed with a binational strategy she's launched in Yuma and Mexicali and San Luis Rio, Colorado, that's really changing the dynamic in her region, but also ag tech. Ag tech is so different from what we knew ag tech even when Julie and I worked in Yuma together. And the components of AI and robotics, if you haven't stayed on the edge, and I'm going to ask Ponch to talk a lot about this because he's an expert in these fields, although I understood his car, which drives on autopilot, took him somewhere else this morning, and he thought he was smarter than the AI. So I'm not sure what we're going to get from Ponch today. But I was in San Francisco, and I met with a company yesterday that is revolutionizing bioseeds. And it's all through algorithms, data analytics, and the way that you can impact the growing season to gain more yield. And if you look at the agricultural base around the world, that is one of the areas that's been the least disrupted since the beginning of agriculture. Whereas every other sector, as you go into Amazon's fulfillment center on the west side of Phoenix, these are robots moving goods around the store or around the shop. 10 years ago, that would have been a pick and pack. Someone physically there pulling against your orders. So the robotics and AI revolution is upon us, and there's a lot of debate about what that means for economies. And so I'm convinced as someone who leads this regional economy, our workforce system must adapt. So adaptability is critical. We must adjust to meet industry needs. This isn't just about money. This isn't just about pouring money into a system. You'll hear today a lot of new philosophy on the approach of enterprise leadership. And I can't underscore enough that with such the struggle politically, and we'll get into this a little bit later, you have some of the most impactful ballot initiatives on this ballot that we've had in a decade, in November, that are going to decide the trajectory of our state. And I'll get into a little bit of what I mean by that here in a minute. So let me pause there, and then we're going to walk through a lot of different topics today. We have a little bit of time, so I hope you don't get bored with us, but we've got till almost around an hour to kind of go through Q&A with this group, and then I'm going to ask and just open it up, and let's hope that we get a back and forth dialogue, because truly you have some of the best thought leaders, but also many of us have worked in urban, worked in rural. Micah spent some time in a small community as well, so we've got a lot of experience working in urban and rural as well, so we'll give you probably more opinions than you want. So let me start with Julie in a brief intro. I'll ask kind of each to give their view. Hopefully I didn't introduce you inaccurately, but and if you want to expand upon things I didn't cover, why don't we start with Julie and we'll go down the line.
Well, thank you, Chris. One of my most memorable experiences in economic development was when we hired this guy. We needed someone to do a rabbit run to Phoenix with a proposal, and we found out he wasn't old enough to rent a car. And he was the only guy available to do it. So
that's right, I remember that.
So it was, an eye-opener that, wow, this guy's young and up and coming and he's brilliant, and it was such a pleasure working with him. But I am the president and CEO of the Greater Yuma Economic Development Corporation, and I am honored to have leadership who has a vision, and the vision does go way beyond our borders. They have created an ecosystem environment, and ecosystem's really a buzzword right now, but we have an environment with our neighbors that is very contrary to what you hear in the press. So we work very closely with Mexicali and San Luis Sonora and Imperial Valley, and we are an agriculture region, and I don't want to rain on your parade, Chris, but we have companies that have been bioengineering seeds for decades, so I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they are doing something a little different, but the most exciting thing that's happening right now in the ag industry is we're piloting a piece of equipment that is completely autonomous. So when you plant too many seeds, but it is all precision. It's done with GPS, so our rows are just, you could run a tape measure and it would be perfect. And so they have to have labor go in and thin and weed. And that per acre, you probably have 40 people in a field. There now is new technology. It's being tested by JV Farms that is all cameras and robotics, and it's doing all the thinning and weeding without even anybody driving a tractor. This thing is completely autonomous. So this is a game changer, and which it needs to be, because labor force is getting harder and harder when you are talking about that kind of labor. It is backbreaking, and so we now have equipment that will be doing what manual labor was doing. And I really do believe that the growers in our area there are the same growers in Salinas, California, and the Yuma Valley is the #1 grower of leafy greens during the winter, and the Salinas Valley is the #1 grower during the summer. And so the technologies are being developed by these groups. And so state of the art, anything that's new and upcoming, it's in Yuma and it's in Salinas. So we have a great relationship with those folks, and there's going to be a lot going on. Hold on to your hats.
I'm Chris Mackay. I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Phoenix. And Julie's not kidding. If you've not been to the farm-to-table tours that happen kind of January to March, it's an entire industry that's just gone crazy in Yuma. And I have guests who schedule their vacations to come down here to be able to go to those tours. It's absolutely incredible what goes on in Yuma. So on the Phoenix side, of course, we are the largest city in the state of Arizona. 13 employment corridors, 517 square miles. We kind of dabble in lots of different areas in advanced manufacturing and biosciences and advanced industries and others. As Chris was talking about, Amazon's facilities and pick and pack. I think from Phoenix's standpoint, really driving forward in redevelopment. A lot of the city is the oldest areas of Phoenix, and driving new and redevelopment for our citizens, ensuring that we don't have a lot of people that are left behind, is truly a strong focus of ours right now, focusing on equitable economic development and ensuring that these older areas of the city come back to their once former grandeur. When you look at, choose Maryvale as an example. In 1952, Maryvale, John F. Long, it was the first of our master plan communities across the entire country, #1. And over the years, I mean, it was celebrated and revered, and over the years, because we sometimes don't pay attention to certain areas, we don't pay attention to certain focuses, things tend to fall. And we are working diligently to lift up all those areas, whether it's the Rio Salado with Senator McCain's vision of the Reimagine Rio that we're working on with Arizona State University, our old gravel pits, our old mining sectors, really working diligently to turn those back into thriving economic engines through creative means, but also focusing diligently on our biosciences and life sciences. The Phoenix Biomedical Corridor in downtown Phoenix, in partnership with ASU and University of Arizona, has become an incredible economic engine where world-class medicine is happening that's being implemented throughout the world. So cancer research and traumatic brain injury and DNA research and others. The city's invested about $400 million in that downtown campus, and it's producing about 9,200 jobs and $1.3 billion in economic impact just in what is that, about 14 city blocks. So we're just really driving forward and moving into different and creative directions. To Chris's point, if we're not reinventing ourselves as a city, if we're looking at old economic development, we are all going to die together.
Good morning. I'm Micah Miranda. I'm with the City of Chandler Economic Development Team. Chandler is at a unique point in our growth and maturity and what we're looking at from an economic development perspective. Traditionally a suburban community, but we are now 85% of the way built out. So with the 15% of our remaining land available for development, we too are starting to turn back in and look at the existing areas of our city and what we can do to maintain and enhance its economic vitality. And a lot of those areas are within our 5 major employment corridors, with the asterisk being the Chandler Air Park Employment Center. So we're spending a lot of time working with our companies in those areas, driving solutions to meet their expansion needs. And I think something we're probably going to talk about later, Chris, is the importance of business retention and expansion. And one of the things we always like to talk about in Chandler is, as much as people are always looking to attract and relocate companies, communities have to be very cognizant on the business retention side. There's 20,000 cities, towns, villages across America, and they would love to pull companies out of your community. So making sure you have an economic development strategy that is receptive to your existing businesses, paying attention to what their needs are, and maintaining their competitiveness is very important. And then we'll obviously get into discussion about economic development, innovation, and policy strategy and taxation. But these are all things that tie back to 3 simple concepts we like to talk about on our team, which is political stability, fiscal sustainability, and vision when it comes to economic development.
Thank you. So my name is Sethuraman Panchanathan. I'll let that digest a little bit. So people call me Punch, and you know why. So I come from, I think I'm shamelessly wearing everything that's possible to show where I come from. Arizona State University. So my role is I'm the Executive Vice President of the Office of Knowledge Enterprise Development, which connotes that I am responsible for advancing research, entrepreneurship, innovation, economic development, global development, strategic partnerships, clinical partnerships, all of that. So essentially what I'm saying is that our office is here to serve the community being the fantastic talent that is around our state and beyond, and being able to provide access to that set of students to come to the university, and then in turn being able to engage with the community to be able to be a provider of solutions for the problems that the community faces, including the economic development as a challenge that we have undertaken to make an impact. Just to provide a few data points, and I often say this to people, these days, it is not enough when we have bus wraps talking about ASU or billboards talking about ASU, because people text and drive, so they miss seeing all of that. So therefore, I will repeat. ASU is the most innovative university in the United States. It's not what we say. It's a US News and World Report which says that. Number 2 is Stanford. Number 3 is MIT. This is your hometown university. And I would strongly urge you to take tremendous pride in this. This is an amazing accomplishment over the last 15 years of focused work. We have 73,000 students on campus this year. We have another 36,000 students online this year. 109,000 students. And the mantra you will hear out there across the nation and beyond is, if you're big, you cannot be good. We have challenged this assumption and said we can be big and not only be good, but be better and the best. And how do I say that? This year we exceeded our research by over $600 million of annual expenditures. What does it really mean? In 2002, we were a $100 million research enterprise, not anywhere in the map of universities. Now we are in the top 7 or top 5 of universities without a medical school in the league of MIT, Caltech, Georgia Tech, and others. It's very hard for people when a party school 20 years ago can become a world-leading school. It's very hard for people to take note, to acknowledge, and more importantly, to take pride and project. So first of all, I want to request all of you to make note and project, because it's an important part of economic development, is people know that they have a hometown university that is simply outstanding. Why is it important? Very straightforward. Go to Atlanta, Georgia Tech. Go to Seattle, UW. Go to the Bay Area, Stanford and Berkeley. Go to Boston, MIT, Harvard, and others. The hometown universities really make a huge impact in terms of economic development outcomes. Therefore, we should take note that ASU is ready to serve and causing a major impact in terms of economic development locally, nationally, and globally. So I welcome all of you to engage with us. I always say this about people. Either you are a partner of ASU, there are only two types. Either you are a partner of ASU or you will be a partner of ASU. There is no third kind. So therefore, if you are a partner of ASU, let's talk about how we expand the partnership. If you are not yet a partner of ASU, let's see how we can be a partner. And before I finish, I tell you, we have got a great leader here in GPEC. We should be very thankful for that. We've got amazing leadership here in the cities. I think we should be very grateful for that. So let's start with a round of applause for that leadership that's causing. Thank you.
Thank you, Panch. So let me start by asking the crowd here today, by way of background, maybe a show of hands, how many of you are from a rural, more rural market? Okay, so we have quite a few today. How many of you are from an urban or relatively urban market? Okay, so about probably a third, maybe 2/3, 1/3, maybe 3/4, 1/4. So what I want to go through next, and I hit on this theme a little bit, but I think Panch reinforced it and others did as well, that when we would talk about, I'm going to give two paradigms and ask for a reaction to this thought. First is, we used to lead with the cost basis of our market, whether you're in a rural part of the state or you're an urban part of the state. The historical value proposition was, look, we are cheaper than market X, your home market, California, New York, Boston, wherever. And then the second piece of a value proposition would be, look at the modern infrastructure. We're young, we've built major roadways, connecting people, connecting as throughput for goods and commerce. A third element would be the stable operating environment. We're inherently a libertarian kind of mindset state where the regulatory environment's pretty attractive for people, meaning we don't have burdens to get licensing, permit process. Everything's relatively expeditious. So we would kind of lead generally with those three things 10 to 15 years ago. Now let's step into today's orbit. One, site selection's happening so much faster. It's happening with much more data intensity. So right now, guess what kind of position that I have open at GPEC? And we're 31 people. Any guesses? I'm trying to hire for a data scientist. So all of the data analytics work, this isn't just now to react to industry. It's about predicting industry trends, predicting geographies where you're going to see change and alternative strategies to cost optimize, to access talent. This whole world in our field is changing. It's no longer going down to Durant's, for those of you from Phoenix, having a cigar with the mayor and having a nice T-bone. That ship has sailed. What's happening today, CHROs, Chief Human Resource Officers, are sitting next to Deloitte or KPMG or Ernst & Young, and I'm just talking about the recruitment side, and they are validating the market's ability to scale their enterprise. So they're measuring what kind of students are coming not only out of ASU, the community colleges, other universities, but how equipped are they in the new needs of industry to be adaptable. So they may come out with a degree. Do they have applied experience in the various fields that the companies now that are evaluating our market need? Because as we're now peaking in most major U.S. markets under 4% unemployment, competition is dramatically different than it was 6-7 years ago. So talent, if you take nothing away from today, talent has bubbled up as the preeminent differentiator. And I don't care if you're in an urban market, you're in a rural market, if you want to, what Micah talked about, preserve your base industry, preserve your local small business. If I'm a mayor, if I'm a city manager, if I'm an economic developer in urban and rural, not only am I trying to understand my market in a much more data-driven way, but I really want to be on the ground meeting with those entrepreneurs, understanding their headwinds, understanding how they're differentiating themselves in this new era of global competitiveness. Because if companies, and this is really hard because I remember being in a rural market, and I came from St. Louis where I spent time also in a rural market, how difficult it is to even talk about advanced technology when you're in survival mode. And you're in a small business model, and what do you care about? Making payroll on Friday. But all of this is interconnected to where over time we have to build more innovation ingenuity in our state and export this ingenuity. We can no longer just be the passive stepsister to California and think that's enough. There's other places that are cheaper than our markets now. Mexico, Nevada, Utah. So we can't compete just on cost. We have to compete, on the reverse side or inverse side of the brain drain. We have to become a brain gain state. And that's largely going to be driven by how we innovate in our education system, P through 20. So let's hold that thought for a moment. I want to get a reaction from each of you. And if you disagree with me, that's okay, in the element of this, if you disagree. I'll probably silence your mic after that. But I'm going to ask you the question about, you think about changes, and all of you have been doing this for more than 15 years. What's the one or two things that you see so different from 15 years ago? And then understand the context of the audience, which is majority rural here. What advice would you give rural leadership today? Because I'll get into kind of the uneven recovery, and there's some graphic numbers that are out there. So anybody want to take that loaded question, big question on?
Sure, I'll be happy to kick it off here. So the two things I've seen differently, I've been in economic development now about 25 years, and commercial real estate in this market for over 30. The two biggest changes I've seen is what Chris talked about. In my history, the human resource officer was never sitting next to the site selector. It just didn't happen. They were going to make the decision as to where their company went based on cost, based on transportation, and where the CEO wanted to live. Workforce was going to move to be near them, and that's the way. So having that human resources officer at the table is key in its change. And the second is, when they walk in the door, I'm a researcher like Chris. I'm an economist and researcher by education and background. When they walk in the door, they know as much about my community as I know about my community. So I used to be able to wow them and showcase things that they didn't know. They know as much as I know when they walk in the door now. And it's getting them comfortable with the workforce that's there. So for me, those are probably the two biggest changes. And then I'll add in a third that kind of dovetails onto that. And that's kind of pre-2007. You would do your standard 10, 20, 30-minute commute. You'd even show them an hour commute and show that you could pull from a workforce of 1.3 million. And I remember the day I was standing with a site selector on a particular intersection, and they said that they only look at a 10-minute commute. And I knew the world changed that day. And I came back to the office, pulled my team into the office, and said, we're screwed. We are in really big trouble because a great portion of the community at that time was still cows and kind of zone COW. It was not an easy place to be. And I said to them, we have to switch. We have to go to, as Chris talked about, we have got to change into an attraction model where we aren't just attracting companies. At that time, it was kind of a 25% attracting companies, 25% retaining our companies, and 50% attracting a new workforce to come and live in that community and creating a great place where that workforce wanted to live. So from that changing, and if I could share anything with our wonderful rural communities here, it's that. You have amazing places that people want to live, and with the advanced innovative infrastructure, there's nothing to stop you from attracting these companies into that market, but you've got to create a place where that workforce wants to live. To Julie's, Julie and I have known each other for more years than she and I care to admit. And Yuma's gone from a place of being military focused and low-end call centers to being a destination location in ag tech and biotech and a multitude of different areas in international activities. So it can be done. It just takes focus on creating a place where we all row together and where we all want to be together.
I would just add on top of that, and I agree 100%, especially on the HR side. 10 years ago, you never, ever saw HR out with the real estate team. It was unheard of. So absolutely, your labor force is increasingly important. But one of the other things that is closely tied to that is availability of infrastructure and speculative product. We have a saying on our team, product wins projects. So those of you who say we have a shovel-ready site, shovel-ready with, another year of getting a building up and all the infrastructure needed, it's not going to work. That doesn't mean shovel-ready. They want buildings. You don't have to have the floors in, but having the product there. About 80% of all the projects we're seeing right now require existing building space. If you don't have it, they're looking somewhere else. And so, having been in a rural community, that is a challenge. And there are some unique tools out there to help you get product vertical. And I would really encourage you to take a look at that, because that has been a major shift. The days of build-to-suit projects are gone. I mean, unless you have that unicorn project that needs a very specific building, you're going to be facing some significant headwinds.
So let me jump into someone before Julie, you go here, to what Micah said. I think that's a really important point, because in rural, it is extraordinarily challenging. It's easy for us to sit up here and say, well, just put up a spec building and then you have a better shot to win a project. But in reality, the financial model, demand models make that really challenging. What I would recommend we see at a statewide level, I would talk to your state legislators, I would talk to your county leadership, really about how do you understand the supply-demand equation of those that need buildings or would evaluate your market, whether you're in Kingman or Sierra Vista, and work with a top real estate group to assess what does that demand portfolio look like. Because last thing you want to do is put all your political capital, for any of you politicians on the line, to put yourself out there and then have you construct a building with public dollars and you have no tenants, right? That's the worst case scenario. What I would argue, though, is I would love to see a city, county, state partnership around community infrastructure, and ultimately working with a real estate group to mitigate their risk to enter your market and build something more than just what Micah talked about. We used to say, well, we have shovel-ready sites. Look at all these shovel-ready sites and the infrastructure that's there. That no longer works anymore. The next stage is almost like 1B, which is, look, we have a shovel-ready site, and we had an architect build a rendering of here's what it looks like, imagine it, and we can deliver that to you in 10 months. And the next stage is 1A, which is actually erecting a building. And I will tell you, with 83% of our deals on the attraction side, again, I don't want to just focus on attraction today, but that's a huge disadvantage for rural today. When Phoenix and Tucson and the urban markets have all this product, and I even see it, a dichotomy within Metro Phoenix, why does Tempe, Arizona, Chandler, some of these other cities, Phoenix, keep winning? They keep getting replenished product. So when Micah talks about product, that's happening organically because the market's driving it. And you see, and Pancho's going to talk about some innovation work that they're doing as well to build product, to build density parks. This whole phenomenon's changing around preparedness, and it's no longer the old adage of just basic infrastructure, water, wastewater, and we'll get you there in 18 months. That's a losing proposition, unfortunately, today. So sorry, I just want to reinforce that.
My mic's probably going to get shut off because I'm going to disagree just a little bit. I'm going to give you the rural perspective. We are not competing for the projects they're competing for. So keep that in mind as well. There's still a demand for manufacturing that is a little bit old school because we still, as consumers, need those things. We are a market that is still competing somewhat for what used to be what we chased. It was the old school chasing, having them come. We had a company yesterday from Mexico looking at our region. They're going to introduce their product into the U.S., and here's one of the things that I have seen that has really been a shift. Their labor force in their plant used to be about 150, and now it's only 30 because it's a completely automated process. Their sales team used to be 30, and now their sales team is 150. So this is another shift that we've seen in this market, is that as automation happens, then you have to have a bigger sales force so that your product is being seen and heard all over the U.S. and North America in this perspective. So we don't have any buildings left. I literally do not have one thing left in our market. And build-to-suit is still an option for food technology, which is the companies that we're targeting. But one of the things that rural suffers greatly from is what Pancho was talking about. What all of these bigger communities get to enjoy is a university presence, university ingenuity, and research and development, and that is missing throughout the rest of the state. There's only 2 places in this state that really have that luxury. And that has to change. And I know online, great. Online is great. But how do you convince a company that you have a university presence when you only have online options? So what we're doing, and I applaud our mayor, this is his vision, is a multiversity. We are going to build the infrastructure, and we're going to allow universities to come in. We're not going to try and have a university plant a flag. We want all of them. And guess who we're working very closely with? Mexicali. They have 11 universities. They want to be in our market. And we may abandon Arizona universities if they don't want to help the outliers in this state. And we all suffer from that. And the reason that these markets, and I'm Chandler, Phoenix, and everybody that Chris represents are so successful is they have both the University of Arizona and ASU in their backyard doing a lot of the heavy lifting for them. And we need that as a rural. So one of the things that I would say to you is align yourself with the junior college because they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us too. And if you don't have a junior college presence, start working with your high schools and getting some of the, if you have industry in your region, have the industries help guide you so that you're retaining the companies that you have. Attraction's sexy, but retention is more important, especially for rural. If you can't keep the companies you have, you're in trouble. So again, it's very counter to what they're talking about in these bigger markets because we still do things somewhat like we used to do 5 years ago. But as Christine said, when they get here, they know as much about us as we do. So we have to make sure that information about us, it's our message, not a message they're hearing from somebody else. We have to make sure what they're getting is accurate and that when they get here, they're ready for us and we're ready for them. And we have to do that kind of research too, and it's kind of hard to research a company when they're kind of under, they're being very quiet about who they are. But it's all about the data, as Chris said, and you have to really have a vibrant, vigorous website that is going to give them what they need to even get looked at, because the site selection process starts there, and you're eliminated immediately if they can't find everything they need. So for rural, I would say make sure you have some insight into the information that is being shared about your region.
Yeah, what's amazing, before Ponch goes here, and we'll let Julie keep her microphone on, is the amount of information you can collect simply from your website today through web scraping. I can tell you from a domain registry standpoint, every company that comes to our website today. So if there's a company, Oracle from the Bay Area is looking at our website, I can travel with them and through our website to see what they're looking at. And we'll run the algorithms to understand, okay, they went to the operating environment page, they went to the labor page, they visited ASU's research page, and then went to incentives. There's a certain level of trigger that we know that they're really looking at this market to make an investment. And we naturally then know what they're interested in terms of the page time, the time in which they spend on our website. And since Ponch is sitting up here, when they get to the U of A page, they bounce. Their bounce rate's really high for some reason. I'm kidding. Joking. I love U of A. So, as well, yeah. So, Ponch, what are your thoughts? And I have a second question for you after this.
Just to Julie's point, the only thing I would say, Julie, is not all towns and not all communities can have a community college close by, adjacent, or a university. Yes, it is nice if you can attract some and have them. I'm not saying that we should not. But I can tell you, there are communities other than Tempe and Chandler and Gilbert and Phoenix and Mesa that ASU partners with. Let me give you an example. Peoria came to us and said, can you help us build an innovation ecosystem there? We are partnering with them. Universities are ready to reach out. It's not about online. Online is just a methodology for everyone if they want to upskill themselves. But if towns and communities want to partner with ASU or U of A or any other university, I'm sure we'll find mechanism of partnering, and physical presence may be one mechanism, but not the only mechanism. And so you can shut my mic off if you want. I differ with you on that. So having said that, what are two things that have changed is your question. So let me address that. First thing, I think in Arizona, We are working as a team. This was not the case many years ago. I've been here for 22 years now. We are now really working as a team and trying to do more as a team. And so that's a good change. And so that's being seen by people outside of Arizona, where they're considering Arizona as a place that they would want to locate themselves. Let me give you an example of this P, Punch Partnerships, P. So basically, if you look at what ASU has been able to do with SkySong in Scottsdale, right? Now this is a project that is 3 years ahead of schedule. It's right now at $32 billion of economic impact over a 30-year time frame, 1,500 jobs. One partnership between City of Scottsdale and the university. City of Phoenix and the university. A fantastic campus, a vibrant economic development ecosystem that they wanted to have, and therefore we partnered with them. Yes, there is physical presence, but that is not it all. In Scottsdale, we don't have a physical presence, we have physical proximity. So we can work these things. Likewise, with Chandler, we've got the Chandler Innovation Center. And we are partnering with Chandler in ways that we can find the best mechanism of advancing economic development with Chandler, through the Chandler Innovation Center, and through public-private partnerships that Mackay and us are working together on. So I can go on and on. For example, the Research Park in Tempe, or the Novus Innovation Corridor, which is adjacent to the university that Chris prompted me to talk about. That is slated to provide $5 billion of economic impact on an annual basis when it is full and complete. So I can go on and on and on about the potential for economic impact. There are companies knocking at our doorstep, asking for location, provided we give them the right environment. And that takes me to the second thing that has changed. And I'll be self-serving. The university. The university is taken very seriously. The product that the university produces, namely the outstanding caliber students, interns, is taken very seriously. The kind of work that the university is doing in terms of development projects, research projects, is taken very seriously because we compare now with world-class research institutions, and that matters. That matters to companies. Can you provide quality workforce at scale? We have in our engineering school, the largest engineering school in the country, 22,000 students. It's a university in itself. 18,000 students on the ground. The first electrical engineering program, totally online, ABET accredited, that our folks in Intel working to upskill themselves, or an officer stationed, in a warship in the Navy is able to take and upskill themselves, because that's what we want to do. We want to be of service. So that's a phenomenal change that has happened. So that's why when Wall Street Journal did a survey of all the employers and asked them, where do you get your best qualified graduates? Guess where ASU ranked? Number 5 in the nation of all publics and privates in the nation. I can go on and on with data. I will inundate you with data. I'm a computer scientist. You have to bear with me. I believe in data and information like Chris. But I can tell you, let's partner. Again, I repeat the word partnership. Let's find ways in which your community can get the best outcome by seeing what might be the best way of doing it with the resources that you have, with the vision that you have, and how might we do something which is unique. It doesn't have to be something that is replicated where it was done in a different place, in a different context. Thank you.
So I have one more question for Panch that wasn't in our question list, but I know you'll be ready to answer this one. But before I do that, any questions from the audience today? Got one back there. Just yell it out and I'll repeat it. So.
Okay, the new paradigm is very important. Rural areas need a new paradigm, and that paradigm is Arizona state land. That is one of the areas where we get no partnering, where they come in and they say, well, we'll sell it to you for $200,000 an acre raw land. That is a big difference. Rural areas are often surrounded by state land, and we do not have a partnership with state land. A new paradigm. Please.
So could everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I need to repeat it? I think everybody shook their head yes. So the issue with state lands, and this is, what's interesting is I hear this regularly. This isn't a new theme, urban and rural, because even some of the fringe markets here have a lot of state land that surround them. And I think the challenge is different. Certainly, the lands, there's more vast lands in rural that are state lands than urban, and there are more privately deeded lands in the urban market, which creates, probably more friendly competition in the urban markets and make it more more challenging in rural. So that is something that there's ongoing discussions about, and some of this group I know is involved, and there's actually a meeting coming up on that, because we need reform. We need, and this is a challenging topic because of some of the constitutional complexities that exist, and when we talk to state land, it used to be, just I'll be very candid because I generally am, is we'd go talk to state lands about a project X that wanted to go on state land somewhere, and by the time they walked through the process and the uncertainty, we had to start over and look at privately deeded lands. And I could give you several examples that Chris and I have been in recently, when they came in and said, well, we have a project that wants to go in this corridor, which is a great corridor, and all the labor shed is there and infrastructure is nearby. And we said, both of us said, well, let's get a backup A, B, and C, because we'll probably not end up going forward with that approach. So I couldn't agree more. We need some of that. And when I talk to staff, I mean, a lot of the times their hands are tied. It's not like they could administratively change the legal positions on these state lands. But any thoughts from the group? Does anybody want to tackle that one? It's a complex issue together that we're going to have to solve.
So it's not, can you hear me? Is this on? Yeah. Okay, sorry. That is not just a rural issue. So I came from Chandler, and God bless those beautiful farmers. They had taken everything with 40 acres and a mule, and I never had to deal with state land. A great portion of the remaining land, so Chandler's 85% built out. Phoenix is only like 65% built out. And the greatest portion of the remaining land is state land. And it is bloody mind-numbing. I apologize. It is... to Chris's point, you go in and you say, oh, I've got this incredible property that's right here along a freeway in one of my most sophisticated employment corridors, and all 3,000 acres that remain all belong to state land. And you walk a clients see it, and they're like, what about this? We love it. This is perfect. And then you say, well, this is what you have to go through to get it. And at the end of the day, you stand on one foot and cluck like a chicken and go through an auction. I mean, you may spend all this money and time and not end up with the property. And then you've got to go through this process, and it's insanity. And I understand the protection for the trust. I understand what to Chris's point, the staff's hands are tied. It's the way that it's set up, but I couldn't agree with you more. If we don't figure out a way to get some of this prime land into production, whether you're urban or whether you're rural, we're just going to be jumped over. Salt Lake City is knocking at our door every moment of the day. And to Micah's point, if you don't think that having product ready to go for these companies in places that they want it, and I'm talking about our expanding companies that are here today, at this moment, I can tell you there are 5 regions or cities that are in my city today meeting with my companies trying to get them to relocate to their cities. So I'll go into an R&E visit. We do about 1,000 a year. I go into a company, oh, Virginia was just here yesterday. They offered us a big basket of incentives to move. We need to expand, but everything around us is state land. What do? It's an issue.
I would just add, the way the state goes about disposing of state trust land really needs a critical eye. I think, from the long-term economic development perspective, current highest offer for the purchasing of the price is kind of a very narrow view of disposing of a property that's subsequently going to be developed. So as an acre comes up for sale, I don't think it's the purchase price at this time, but it's the ongoing economic impact and how that land is used that really needs to be thought about. Because once that land's developed, it's developed. And so different types of projects have different economic impacts that will not only impact the state, but also impact your community. So as state trust land becomes available, take a really close eye and say, what is the highest and best use of this property moving forward, not just at this time? Yeah,
because we see in this the frenzy around state lands generally comes with the home builders, and it's driving up the price of the land, so the money goes to the education trust. But what Mike is talking about, I think, is critically important, is that the long-term economic value that those properties could generate if they were balanced with more job intensity. And I even think rural, it's more pronounced. So imagine if you did have, to your question, more access to those lands where you could plan, like we talked about earlier, state, county, and local level planning infrastructure, that you can then build parks and other parks, meaning like industrial parks, commerce parks, that would enable you to be competitive. And then balance that with other uses. But today, it's so rigid based upon the provisions of the Constitution, it makes it incredibly challenging to do any kind of dynamic modeling on economic value. It's all about the price point. So we got our work to do. So I'm going to compartmentalize that one, because that's a to-do for all of us to take away. Do we have another question? I thought right over, I'll go here, then we'll go there. Go ahead.
Secondary to the comments already about state land, even when you're successful in getting through that heinous process, they hold you up for the archaeological study. I'm from Preston Valley, and we're just struggling with that like you do not even. We're trying to put approved road to go through. It'll be 4 to 5 years before they do the archaeological study. We're also trying to restore our watershed. Same issue. We have to work together to solve these multi-level problems.
So the comment for those of you in the back was about the Class 1, Class 2 surveys, the EAs that are, the environmental assessments that are required post that sounds like the auction. And so we'll add that one to the list of items that we need to talk to. And you know, again, as we talk to the governor's office and the governor directly, you know, he is, you know, has been a champion for economic development. And I would say, arguably more than anything else, you know, the speed that we need to operate as government needs to be aligned with business. And this is one that's been looming out there. So this isn't a new issue, I know, for the state, but it's one that I think together, urban, rural, you know, we need to come together on this because it's a critical, you know, economic sustainability issue, but just more pronounced in rural. Because if you can't get that road for 5 more years, you know, think of all the economic leakage that you have by not having that. Back here.
My question is really for Micah. Micah, in a rural community where you may not have inventory that is built to modern standards, have you ever heard of partnerships where cities will use collective sites and then the company tries to do
Yeah, so the question was about in rural markets, as the gentleman asked, have you seen any examples where the public would participate with industry? Is that fair? To get some kind of vertical building position for the market?
Yes, there are a couple. There are many different ways to go about that. Industrial development authorities can play a role. The federal government and the, I don't know, what's the acronym I'm looking for? The economic.
The EDA.
EDA, thank you. Has programs out there to help get that in there. And then, you know, the state, you know, we, as cities and towns, you do have authority to do economic development agreements. They have to be positive for the city, obviously. But yes, the cities can bring their resources to the table to help craft a project, whether it's on the city infrastructure side, whether it's land participation. So there are a lot of creative ways to go about doing that. And, you know, depending on what part of the state you're in, talk to GPAC, talk to Julie, talk to the folks up in Flagstaff and the teams down in Tucson, because a lot of those regional organizations, and if you're in a smaller community, have relationships that can bear fruit in crafting a deal and helping the communities understand what are the different options out there. So I've seen it in a lot of different cities where they've taken raw land, set it aside, and then gone out to RFP for development. And working with the Arizona Commerce Authority, Keith Watkins on the rural side, I mean, they have grants out there to help get infrastructure in place to allow for some of that speculative development.
I'd just like to add, we just recently did a project exactly like you described, and the city of Yuma had excess land that they put on the market, but it happened to be contiguous to land that they were utilizing for fire department training and things like that. So the city made their land, they bought that so they could control who their neighbor would be. And so they were able to undo that. But because we had a project attached to it, we were able to apply for an ESP grant through the ADOT, and we were able to build out the road that went to that. So that was state and city working with a company. And because the city came up and the state helped fund the road, the company located in Yuma, and they did make that their choice, and they invested $35 million in a build-to-suit building for a food processing plant. So they're going to make hard-boiled eggs. So we would have lost that project because we were at a standstill in land negotiations in a shovel-ready site. So the city did step up, and they took excess property and they put it on the market, and they did have to have an evaluation done on the land, you know, what the value of it was, and they did have to pay value. But that didn't slow anything down. So if you can look at what the city owns already and repurpose some of that, because that's what Yuma's been doing. Yuma did an inventory of all of their property that they owned and what could actually be of value and go on the market. And then they ended up landing this project by doing that.
So one other item I would recommend you evaluate, too, to your question, is this past year, as part of the federal administration's tax cut plan, there was embedded in that what are characterized as opportunity zones. And these opportunity zones allow for the net, it's a capital gains carry forward strategy. So there's something like $8 trillion available that's liquid cash that's going to go to Uncle Sam or go into this program that would, based upon the zones that I can't remember the number, but there's dozens of zones around our state, many in rural. This could be part of the capital stack. So if these funds are created, it can be part of, again, the capital stack, whereby the individual that has the capital gains can actually place their capital into a zone, and if they leave it there for 5 or 7 or 10-year increments, after 10 years, they don't pay capital gains on the upside, the earnings. So I would recommend you look at that as well as part of that capital stack. But I think, to Julie's point, it has to be a myriad of options. So whether it's EDA grants aligned with ESP grants for road infrastructure, Commerce Authority support. I would argue, though, being now in an urban market, Julie and I used to decry the state of Maricopa. Some of you probably have that mindset, right? So I think I have a T-shirt under this that used to say that, state of Maricopa, because it always feels like this metro market gets all the assets. I still do agree that happens. I think it's a function of it's 76% of the state's economy, and I'm not saying that to be boastful, but rather I think we should be looking at a triple-down strategy for rural Arizona today that looks at exactly addressing these issues: community infrastructure, community facilities, even looking at public policy that would enable rural to compete. And it's not competing, to Julie's point. She's absolutely right. How often do we compete with one another? I mean, it really doesn't happen. Rather, I know Julie from my former life of competing with St. George, Utah, and Reno and these other areas in California. But even that, it's not about competition. It's about preparedness. So when your young companies need to expand, and they're looking at their capital portfolio of, can they do that in Arizona? Do they need to look elsewhere? We as economic developers need to mitigate their risk. And that's an interventionist strategy which is not known in Arizona, just so you know. People don't like the government intervening, quote unquote. I will tell you, if we're not intervening and mitigating risk, rural is going to be left behind. I'll ask you to indulge me on, if you haven't taken a look at Economic Innovation Group, just go to eig.org. They put out a lot of studies on economic dynamism and the post-America recovery. It'll blow your mind. And again, someone who, again, have a soft spot for rural parts of the United States, it's been the most unbelievable, uneven recovery in the United States. And I think it's leading to the political dynamic we're seeing today on the fringes, is that a lot of the urban markets, Ponch mentioned Atlanta, Dallas, Boston, look what's happened in the job index, the earnings index. They're all rising. Rural's been relatively flat, and a lot of our non-urban markets are still in the recovery. So I don't think you can take it lightly as a state that a market or two might be continuing the job expansion, while other parts of the state are still relying on tourism and other attributes to drive their economy. But I think we've got to really look at a triple-down strategy on this. And if we don't, I think you're going to see the unevenness occur. And I even argue with my colleagues here in Phoenix, there's unevenness amongst the urban model as well, where you're seeing urban inequity evolve. And so that's something we have to take on as well in the Metro Phoenix region. So there's a lot there. So I did want to ask Ponch one question, just totally put him on the spot, then we'll go here. I was up in San Francisco and I was meeting with Teal Capital, which is Peter Thiel's company. He was an early PayPal Mafia guy. He's done very well. You guys, I know, interface with them. And we were in this kind of roundtable discussion. It was a futurist view of the United States. So it was like this big, grandiose view of like, what does life mean? It was almost like that. But it was more about universities of the future or education systems of the future. And there was a debate amongst people way smarter than me that were saying the education system as we know it today with digital education, 20 years from now, we may not have universities. And they were like hardened view on this. We may not care about a degree in this whole agile learning model that's evolving. So I'm curious, I'm going to totally put you on the spot. It's not in the notes. But I'm just curious. You're a smart guy, so I know you plugged into this. I'm just curious what your response is to that, because I think it's an interesting discussion.
That it's true that there is this divided view that universities will become irrelevant to universities. Is it all by some of the Puritans who still want to hold on to the universities as they are today. One concept that is going to be definitely the case, it's universal learning, lifelong learning. It is not it that what you learn in the university is what is going to carry you through your life. I always say that I might have had 3 or 4 jobs in my life, but people are going to have 5 or 6 careers, if not more, in their life. So which means that it is about the preparedness. So universities have a role to play in the following sense. There is a demographic of students, the 18 to 24 year old if you want. They come into a university, and universities have to also reinvent themselves, and we are doing that at ASU. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. I increasingly emphasize that while skill sets might have been the way that universities have configured themselves in the past, through disciplinary domains, I am a computer scientist, I am an electrical engineer, I am a psychologist, I am a historian. But that artificial classification is slowly going to start to disappear. It is not only going to be about the skill sets, but what I call the mindsets. The mindsets is what people will get when they come from an 18 to 24-year-old background, when they come to university, in addition to a few skill sets, which will be transdisciplinary, of course. Mm-hmm. I have students at ASU where they do a major in psychology and a minor in music, or a major in computer science and a minor in policy. Many students do this. They take advantage of this because that is the future. So when I talk about mindsets, what do I mean by that? And this goes to the point that, Chris, you were making, what I call I term it the great mindset. What does it mean? G is for global mindset. You cannot be, staying away from thinking global. You may act local, but you have to think global. The R is a research, inquisitive mindset. You're constantly thinking about curiosity-based, picking up this information, this skill set, all through your life. E is the entrepreneurial mindset. It's not that you're going to become an entrepreneur, but the mindset of being an entrepreneurial, of entrepreneurial nature, you're risk-taking, you're ready to change, you're ready to, do things that otherwise you feel very, very embedded in what you have always been doing. A, the adaptive mindset. And T, the team mindset or the transdisciplinary mindset. If you don't have these mindsets as the basis of your education paradigm for the future, universities will become obsolete. So that what you're talking about as being discussed right now is the universities of the past, what I call the academy, the university academy view of universities. But universities are morphing, and if they don't morph, they will become outdated. But universities have a role to play in shaping and molding that mindsets and skill sets of people in the 18 to 24 year old age range. At the same time, universities of ASU are also making themselves relevant in the K-12 spectrum. We have a digital high school now which can reach any rural area for high quality K-12 pipeline. Universities have to play a role. We have colleges of education who train the teachers, and the teachers should be trained to think that way. And then on the other side, that is a lifelong learning. In ASU is right now building a senior living on campus. You may wonder, what the heck are they doing? It's because you have a win-win situation there. You have people who have life experiences who are located on campus that can benefit the students on campus. At the same time that as they're engaged in lifelong learning. We call it the Mirabella Project. We have in our online platform 500,000 students taking a course or a module from 192 countries, 7 continents worldwide, free courses, to sensitize them to what a university experience is all about. We are doing everything possible in the lifelong learning spectrum because we believe the universities of the future have to think this way. And when you talk about universities in that framing, universities are not going to disappear. But if you talk about the framing of universities of the past, surely you can talk about it, going away. Yes, you will constantly upgrade your skill sets, and that's the way, that's the future. And I give a lot of talks and write about the future of learning. As I said, my own research area is artificial intelligence and machine learning. I've been working on it for the last 25 years. People talk to me about, how will it be, everything will become obsolete, the jobs will disappear and so on. Jobs won't disappear. And this goes to the comment that you made this morning. My car, which is a Tesla, was telling me to come to Phoenician, and I in my head had it as Biltmore, and I was driving. And my car was telling me, go to Phoenician, right? And I'm saying, no, I'm going to, I think Biltmore is where the meeting is, and I'm going there. Okay? So what do we mean by this? The paradigm. The paradigm is, it is not just about the machine. It's not just about the human. It's how the machine and the human are going to work in a symbiotic manner. That is the future. So it's not about worry the jobs will disappear. Jobs did disappear. If you go all the way from 19th century, jobs have disappeared. Okay? And they will. But they will morph, they will change. And therefore it's upon us to make sure that we provide the environment to help people adapt and move. And maybe there is more adaptation to do than ever before now and will be in the future. And we have to be ready for that future. And that's what universities' roles are.
We had a question here, I believe. Is that right? Yes. You still have it? Okay. Go ahead and shoot.
I'm the mayor of Wilcox. We are being told that we're the next Napa Valley. The grapes are coming. There's nothing for sale anymore. All the buildings downtown have been bought by the wineries, including the Chevrolet House, to build barrels. I mean, they're geared up. But the problem we seem to be having is that the government has stepped in on these guys and said, okay, if you have an existing well, you can deepen it and you can fix it, but you can't dig a new one. And there's lots of land left that doesn't have a well on it. And so it's like they're limiting our growth. And the money that's coming is, we get calls from California every day now for those cars. Last year it started, this year now it did again. And they're really upset. And this is old, big money. They're coming in there and building $4 to $5 million homes. And they're buying 180 acres, putting in grapes. And they want to do things like work with the universities. They were in touch with, they're smart, they got a lot of money. Sometimes money, no option for them. But our problem is that people are trying to restrict this thing to be through like a watershed or something. And it's like, well, they're wanting to do things like they can get on a cell phone and they can control the water on their property with a cell phone to water a plant that's 2 foot deep. They can water it in the top, the middle, or the bottom, whichever it needs. They can look on the cell phone, be sitting in a light and go, oh, that 5 acres needs water in the middle, but not the bottom, not the top. It's wet there. And boom, they water it. So they're being real conservative with the water. But it's fighting those kind of entities that won't let us. I mean, can you imagine somebody saying, well, Phoenix, you're done. You're not going to dig another well. The wells you have you can work on, but you're not going to dig another one. Even though you have this big development, I used to be a developer in Houston. I mean, we'd take 2,500 acres and dig a new well, put in super true plant. Well, you couldn't do it anymore and fight fire or get rid of raw sewage with 2,500 more homes. So you had to do something. But no problem. You just did it. The money was there, they did it. They won't let you do it.
Is that ADWR or who's the, okay.
And we just, the dairies, we have a big dairy that's probably has 15,000 cows on it now. 5 years ago it had 50. I mean, things like that are
Yeah.
happening. The wine seems to be the deal.
Well, Mayor, we might, as a panel, need to come up and check that out with you and assess the wine quality. So there we go. October. He said everyone's invited, so we'll all be in Wilcox.
And
For the-
I'll let everybody know that, honest to God, 73%, according to the wineries, of all grapes sold in the state of Arizona from Wilcox. 73%.
That's great.
It's our climate, it's our water. It's another thing too. We had a developer that wanted, a guy, not a developer, but a manufacturer come in and said, wanted to build Intel parks. And about 150 jobs. And he only wanted to come because of our water. He said, I can save millions of dollars a year, because I guess they wash the plastic. I mean, not wash the car, but they wash the plastic to make the plastic. And they don't have to use a lot of chemicals to bring that down to the level they need. Because our water was good enough, they didn't have to do that. It saved millions of dollars a year.
Well, maybe what we'll do is let's pull that one aside because there may be some things that we together could do to help you with that on the economic development side. So let's hold that one and let's catch up after this. If that's okay. I saw one right back here, and then we'll go here, then there.
Okay, first, foremost, thank you guys for being here for
one thing I was going to say in my comments is, it turns out that 2/3 of new jobs are jobs created by entrepreneurs. 2.5 million new jobs by startup companies. So my suggestion would be is to be a platform where you can provide the ability for good ideas that might be amongst those people that might then shape themselves into, small startup ventures that can build economic vibrancy in your region. To what you said, as winery as a focus area, you find what is it that you can solve by you being an exemplar for that kind of, companies that might be birthed from there to solve a specific problem or an issue. You said people are moving from California. I would have to guess that they have the entrepreneurial spirit in them, moving from California. You hope so. So how might you be a mechanism by which you are able to promote entrepreneurship? Rather than waiting for this one big company to locate there at some point in time by providing land or buildings or whatever it is, try to create your own entrepreneurial environment as a quick way of seeing if you can boost economic development. That will be my advice to you.
And then secondly, kind of playing off what Ponch said, is connect your workforce and your citizens to your community. Make them feel involved. Let them carry your message for you. Let them be the ones who are having a beer at the pub and they tell the entrepreneurs how great it is to live here and what it's really like to be connected to your community. As we're looking at the new workforce, and especially on the entrepreneurial side, is the number one thing we've been able to do is to connect them to the community, connect them to the government, make them feel like they're a part, get them on boards and commissions, getting them making the decisions for your community. That is the way you engage them, you solidify them, you anchor them, and then they carry your message for you.
I'll tell you should talk to Chris. Chris, I'm really serious. Chris is doing a great job in Phoenix, I tell you. And, we are, of course, partnering with Chris, but you're doing a great job there in terms of bringing the community feeling, providing the avenues by which entrepreneurs can really achieve their potential. So thank you for what you do, and I think you should definitely talk to Chris about it.
Yeah, and one thing I think that's really unique about, I think Ponch touched on this theme, about Arizona economic developers, there's this kind of sense of we're all in this together, and whether it's GPEC, which we have a lot of resources because we're the largest EDO in the state, and we have a lot of research capacity, and so even a case study like the one you're dealing with, our team is absolutely happy to work with the Commerce Authority, any other partners, to help give you additional support, even though, again, as Micah and Chris, they're a large part of our GPEC budget, but I will tell you, they're here to lift every market up, and that's really unique. You go to Atlanta, go to Chicago, it's all a parochial strategy about that community. We're so different from that, and that's what I appreciate about leadership in Arizona. So we had, I think, one, was it here? Did I point at you the right last time? Okay.
I'm kind of Ponch and Christine. Startup entrepreneurs create 2/3 of jobs. We in rural areas want to keep our entrepreneurs local instead of having them stuck in the city.
Correct.
Right?
Mhm.
Most of us in the room would like to do that. I started 3 companies, 2 of them with credit cards and mortgages like we used to do, but those avenues have dried up. Kids today don't have those. They need capital. They need money. The last business I started in upstate New York, my partner and I went to an angel investment network. We made a pitch. We walked out with $100,000. In rural areas, as I get around Arizona, I don't find angel networks. I don't find that beautiful capital that's there to help a young startup get going so that they can mature and get to more government or more mature capital. Government capital is slow.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask anybody who wants to answer, what avenues do we have for private, angel, organized capital in rural areas?
I'll jump.
You wanna
I'll
talk
jump,
about that,
I'll
Micah?
jump in.
Micah's led a strategy on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this because you nailed it. That's a major challenge we're facing, and one of the things that Chandler and our neighboring communities, to Chris's point, how we work in a very collaborative manner, we launched an angel investor initiative, and the point of this initiative wasn't to deploy capital; it was to help educate, activate, and deploy potential angel investors within Maricopa County, Arizona. There's a lot of people who can become accredited investors. And accredited is spelled out by Security and Exchange Commission. But what we were looking to do is identify those people with the means and interest and teach them what does it mean to be an economic developer, or excuse me, an angel investor. And we had our first 2 series this past year, and our goal in the Southeast Valley is to identify and activate 250 net new angels. And so we partnered with AETI, Arizona Founders Fund, ASU, and our other partners to put these programs on to bring people, to Chris's point, from the community into the economic development family, and to let them know about the opportunities for supporting those smart startup businesses in rural and urban counties. So we've done it. We've set it up. We're happy to share our experiences with any community or region who is interested in getting an angel network together, because it really comes down to education. In Arizona, my perspective is we've made a lot of money in the real estate field. It's tangible. You can go out there, you can kick it. Investing in a startup technology company, if you're not in that field, it's scary. So the angel networks allow you to bounce ideas off one another, get feedback from people who have done it, and that's our goal, to help take us from really a secondary economy to that pinnacle economy. We need to have a robust investment network outside of what I'll just call commercial development. So happy to answer any questions or talk with you offline.
I think so. Oh, do you have another question? Okay, so I'm already off track. I went there to there, and there was somebody else. Was it back here? Okay, go ahead. He said wine. Great question. So I'll give you my perspective, and then, yeah, the question was about, has economic development had a big enough seat at the table relative to the water debate that's happening in the state? At first, I'd say probably not, but there was a committee, I think it was called the Water Augmentation Committee, that was led out of the governor's office 2 years ago. I don't know if any of you on that one? I can't remember. No, I know some of your people were. Yeah, I saw Vic and a few others. So I sat on this for a while, and what I learned was how complex water policy is in the state of Arizona, and how vigorous of a debate it is, and particularly when we try to bestow upon the conversation economic value. And it comes back to what the mayor of Wilcox had talked about is, it's all relative to your own viewpoint of, we have obviously a lot of agricultural base in the state of Arizona that has a lot of water rights, and that's really important for our state. You have urban markets that want to evolve for industrial use purposes. You certainly have more rural markets that want to build housing and so forth that need water capability. And yet we're in the desert, so scarcity management's needed. So I would just answer your question by saying we probably haven't been enough, and I don't think we forced the issue enough. And I think this is something that, if I had to pick one thing outside of education and talent, if we don't have a long-term water vision, which I do think we've had a great water vision since our inception as a state and water management plan, and we're using, I know in the city of Phoenix, 1957 water consumption levels, so we've done a good job in terms of conservation and scarcity management. With that said, though, the next 100 years for Arizona is going to be critical on water. And I know ASU is looking at that now with, an environmental institute assessing things like in urban greater Phoenix is heat island effect, air quality, all these impacts, and water's a piece of that. So I don't know if you have another kind of slant to your question, but I think we need to be part of the conversation. But I will tell you, sitting around the table with a lot of people who are water experts, it is a very complex issue that we need to be part of and help shape for our future. But any other thoughts from the group?
No, I just wanted to say that I think you cued me to that. There's a lot of work that we are doing in terms of how to manage the water so that it might stay for not 100 years, but several hundred years. In fact, I'll quote my boss, President Crow, who would say that if 2050 we wake up and find that Arizona has a water problem, then ASU should be blamed. That we as a university did not think about proactively about what the state needs and how may I find creative solutions. So we are very engaged at the national level, at the regional level, at the state level, in terms of finding solutions, and through several mechanisms, reclamation of water, as well as water modeling, things that we do, and a variety of other things that helps us to stay ahead of the curve, not become like some other states. I won't talk about them, but they're facing acute problems right now.
And I'll just add, from a community perspective in Chandler, we've had some really visionary leadership at mayor, council, city manager, and in our municipal utilities department. And I think it was about 3 years ago we instituted a water allocation policy, and it basically prioritized and reserved water for economic development. And very forward-thinking, cutting-edge. So at the municipal level, you do have control over your water and where it goes. And so I would encourage you to take a look at the Chandler water allocation policy and how we've gone about setting aside water for future economic development needs. So if we have another, major semiconductor manufacturing plant wanting to drop down in Chandler, we have water within our portfolio to serve them. And so that was one of a kind, and it's something the city of Chandler is very proud of.
Great. Well, I saw there was like 5 or 10 other questions, and what I'll have to do, because we're out of time and I'm getting the hook, it's my 3rd time I got the hook now, that we have to break. And so what I'll ask the speakers to do, I think Chris had to run off to a meeting if she didn't cancel it right after this, but please join me in a round of applause for our panelists today.
This is the problem with professors. They won't have the last word. So you have to bear with me. What I wanted to say is engagement. Be engaged. That's a solution. You're here. Great. So, I want to applaud Julie on that front. A couple of days ago we had the space symposium. The NASA chief was here. All the congressional delegation were there. 40 to 50 companies were there in the event hosted by ASU. And the mayor of Yuma and Julie, they were both there, sort of making connections, ensuring that this new, potential spaceport kind of thinking of what Arizona can be, and they're engaged. So that's what I want to do, is to get all of you engaged in these kinds of activities. Be engaged. And GPEC is doing amazing thought leadership kind of discussions that they have in IoT, in AI, in all of these things. I think it's important to be engaged. City of Phoenix is engaged. Chandler is engaged. It's just that's what it takes at the end of the day. I'm sure you know this already, but be more engaged. That will be my parting word. Thank you very much.
Great. So we'll reconvene at 10 after about a 15-minute break, and I'll ask the speakers to stick around for a little bit if you have a few other questions. So thank you very much for being here this morning.